and welcome to the hiatus episode of the podcast. So this is basically an episode where I'm just going to explain a bit about why I'm deciding to hiatus the podcast and just my thoughts on wrapping up this segment of the podcast. So I remember I started this thing in June officially. That was when I released the first episode, but I had started thinking about this back in April, so it was a good more than 6 months ago at this point. And I've learned so much as an artist and as a podcaster, and I guess also as a producer of the podcast. I really did not expect to learn so much, to be honest. I didn't really have any expectations other than I just wanted to learn and find out from different artists. And most of the people I've interviewed, I didn't even know about until I started the podcast, because I just kept finding people through my recommendations, through asking other artists, you know, that kind of thing. So even though the initial, I would say, let's say 6, 7, 8, up to 10 episodes, I knew the artists. After that, most of the artists I did not know, or I found through websites, things like that. So it's been really fun. It's been a really fun journey in finding and sourcing the artists and looking and researching at their work, and then finally being able to interview them and build this database, I suppose, of digital artists whom not just myself, but others can go back and refer to. Like I said, I also learned a lot as a podcaster. I mean, I've upgraded my gear at this point. I've even got like a proper mic with a stand, and, you know, it's crazy. Like, I used to record straight into my phone. I'd set it up on like a tripod stand, and I'd just keep the phone angled to my face, and that did work, I suppose. But now that I look back on my previous episodes, I can hear how audially different and bad it sounds. I think that just goes to show that I've, I guess, stepped up my game in podcasting. But really kudos to podcast editors, because it really takes a lot of effort to make these voices sound good. It's really a lot of work to edit audio, and I didn't realize how much work it was until I had to start doing it myself. As a producer as well, in making the podcast, you know, it's a lot of effort in keeping things organized, you know, with regards to keeping track of who you've emailed, who said yes, who said no, who said maybe, who sent what, when each interview is, you know, and trying to juggle all of this around a full-time job is definitely not an easy feat. You know, I've changed jobs and things like that, so it's been a bit harder to keep up with this schedule, and trying to fit things into my working schedule. I mean, somehow it worked out for the last 6 months, but yeah, I think just because it's all getting a bit too much, I'm just having to shelve the podcast for now. Actually, I'm going to be focusing more on YouTube. I think it's easier to get growth on YouTube faster, especially because for podcasts, it's a very slow burn, and also it's very difficult to get or gauge feedback from your listeners, because there's not a comment section. It's not like you can see who's subscribed to you, and because the podcast platforms are so varied and people use different things, it's not so easy to keep track, I suppose. Having said that, of course, if you keep doing podcasts for like 2-3 years, probably more, you can probably build a good listenership. I mean, even now, like I don't really keep track of the numbers with regards to the podcast, because it's not something that I really care about too much. But when I do check it out, I realize that it's a lot lower than it should be or could be, but it is increasing, and the engagement, I suppose, is also increasing a bit. But I think for now, my efforts are best concentrated on YouTube, which is why I'm going to be focusing on that. You can follow me if you want. I make videos about just creativity in general, traditional art, digital art, anything art related, basically. And I'll leave the link in the description. There's so many lessons that I've learned from all the different artists. I've made a YouTube video about that, actually, but I'll share a few things that I've learned here on this episode. And I think one of them is that it's okay to have different aesthetics. That's kind of a more superficial, almost side point, I suppose, but a lot of artists have a different aesthetic for each project that they're working on. And the thing is that social media doesn't really show that, because you have to keep this kind of singular aesthetic, which is fine. But also, social media is not as important as everyone thinks it should be. That was something that I learned as well. And interestingly, once I started the podcast, I actually stopped worrying and focusing so much on my personal Instagram. And to be honest, I find that when I don't post, I actually get more like followers and engagement, which is really ironic. So yeah, like I personally don't believe in the whole idea that you should have to post every day and you'll get more followers. Like it's completely old news, I think. Even if it works for some people, it never worked for me. So yeah, I think when I started the podcast, I just focused on a million different other mediums. Like I was able to think about traditional mediums. I wasn't so pinholed or pigeonholed into just doing digital art because that's what my Instagram was about. No, because these artists, what they were telling me was they were basically giving me permission to say, look, it's completely okay to do different things. So that's what I started doing since the podcast. Like I tried soft pastel, I was using gouache, watercolor, acrylic, everything. And it was really freeing and it's been really nice as well. I've realized that everyone has a message, everyone has something to say and everyone has something important to say, even if they are not necessarily in a, let's say, advanced stage in their career. They always have something relevant to say. And of course, you can listen to the details on my YouTube video. Basically, all of the conversations I've had have been very deep and meaningful. And definitely, as I progressed with the interviews, I could feel myself kind of increasing in my skills as an interviewer as well. That's something that I didn't expect either. Being an interviewer is actually a very difficult job because you have to listen to their answers at the same time as think of questions or predict questions to ask in the future. You have to be concise, you have to be very kind of selective with your words, and you also have to ensure that you don't run over the time or that you don't undercross the time. Like, it can't be like a 10-minute podcast interview, and some people do genuinely only just say like one word or one sentence and you really have to push them, whereas some people just keep talking and talking and talking, so you have to learn when to rein them in and you have to cut out some questions because they've talked so much. So kind of managing that it's also very interesting. Oh, and another big thing is you have to keep up your energy levels, which is something that, again, I think actually another reason that I'm trying to hiatus the podcast, because I cannot keep up my energy levels for this podcast. Every time I sit down to record, I'm literally exhausted. I can't, maybe even now you can hear it. I'm not full of energy and like, I don't sound like super enthusiastic like podcast hosts should sound. So I think that's a very big thing. And honestly, like people who are public personalities, it's genuinely such a kudos to them because it's really difficult to keep up being so energetic and positive all the time. I do definitely want to come back to this podcast because especially during the last episode with Jason and just the general last few episodes, reading or listening to the interviewees, hearing their thoughts, hearing why they wanted to do the podcast and hearing how excited they were, it really does make me want to come back to this as a project. I think I'm really glad I started it and I'm really glad that I've gotten this far with it. My goal for the end of this year was 25, so I'm really glad that I was able to get to 26. And it's just a really fun project, but I think later on, maybe when I have time, it's something that I can definitely come back to. And I do have a list of people who actually either I had to turn down or, I wanted to contact until I decided to hiatus this. So, there are still people who are in the works and maybe when I interview them, if I can interview them later down the line, they'll be even more experienced and they'll have different things to share. So it could be fun, it could be interesting, but definitely this is not the end. It's just a break. For how long? I don't know. But I do hope you'll stick around when this podcast does decide to come back. And I hope you've enjoyed the episodes thus far. The good thing about this podcast is that you can listen again and again to different episodes or read them as well. You can read them on the blog and you'll find something new each time. You'll learn something new each time. So definitely go back, check out the episodes, listen to the ones that you've not listened to. Trust me, there's all kinds of episodes that, you can learn all kinds of things. The episode with Douglas, there's a YouTube kind of tutorial or walkthrough. It's like 2 hours long where he goes through his process. It's super interesting. There's a Korean episode with Junho. I'll leave all of the ones that I'm referencing down below because I can't remember the numbers right now, but these, there's just so many different things that's happened and really you can take so much at whatever stage you are in life, whatever career path you want to take in life, whether you want to be a concept artist, an illustrator, character designer, background artist, there's literally an episode for you. So do check it out, and I hope you'll stick around, and I wish everyone the best, and I will see you at some point in the future for another episode of the podcast. But for now, stay safe, stay productive with your art career, and you can still follow me on Instagram or on YouTube, where I'll be consistently posting. Alright, with that, I'll see you later. Bye!